Hello, everyone. Can you guys hear me okay? Yay, fantastic. All right, well, we're going to wait for just a few minutes here as a few people more people get on, and we'll get started.
Hello. Can you hear me?
Yay! Yes.
Okay. It took me a minute to get on. I know we're still waiting for some people to join us, but hi, Kristen.
Hey, everyone. That's good. That's always nerve-wracking the first time we get on hop in for a while, and you're like, oh gosh, is everything going to work?
Yeah, absolutely. Especially in a new setting, and I'm actually on a different laptop than usual. So
yes.
Well, I know we're waiting for people to join us, but maybe we can just catch up a little bit. It's nice to see you, Casey.
Yes, same here. And you're actually in New York right now, is that correct?
I am in New York, here for a couple of days, and then a couple more cities on my list.
On the Hillary tour.
On the Hillary tour, yeah. I think we always seem to manage to plan these sessions when I'm traveling.
Yeah, of course. Naturally, right?
Yes. I've definitely done a couple out of hotel rooms in Boston. Yep. And I think this is the first from New York, though.
Okay, sounds good. Well, I feel like we're, sometimes a jack of all trades. You never know what life is going to throw at us. And I know next week when we have Heather Crowley is going to be on with us. And of course, when we got the date set, then she said, oh, no, we're going to be hospitalized. So she's actually going to come live to us next week from her from the Children's Hospital in St. Louis.
That's so absolutely appropriate.
Yeah, we're always adapting. For
sure. Now, I don't know how long you want to, let's give people a couple more minutes, right, to get things rolling. How's Miss Stella doing?
She's doing pretty good right now. I don't know if you guys saw on my personal Facebook page, but she was using her communication device when Lincoln was reading to her the other day. And she kept saying, read again, princesses and dragons. I'm like, Lincoln, you better get on that. You need to go find her a princess and dragon book.
That is amazing.
Right? So.
I had a pretty cool communication moment with Esme 2 nights ago. She, I think, as you know, she doesn't verbalize in ways that are understandable most of the time, but every once in a while you get something that you can really understand from her. Sure. And so she's been sick, and she was up, and she's having, it's like 1 a.m. She's having trouble clearing her secretions, and I won't go into the details, but it takes a lot, and it's a long time, and it's exhausting for her. And so she's got everything out, and she lay back down and curled over. She's so tiny. And I was rubbing her back and telling her that she did a good job. And I was just quiet for a minute, and I heard her little voice go, "Thank you."
Oh.
And I was like, oh, man.
And your heart just swelled to like 20 the normal size. And
yes, a little bit like the Grinch.
Yeah. Oh, love that.
And all I could think is like, I must be doing something right, because this kid is like, she could be so angry right now, and I would not be. I would not hold it against her, but yeah.
So sweet. Love it.
Yeah. So we're about 5 after. Maybe we can start doing a little bit of intro
Sounds good.
For the event, and then we'll be able to bring on our guests to have them give us a hand and tell us some updates. We're doing this a little bit differently than we have in the past, right? I mean, normally, those of you who are joining us are used from who were here with us last year are used to Casey getting on and introducing me and usually trying to make me cry before I get on camera.
Maybe.
And instead, now that we are right smack dab in the middle of the transition between Casey and myself, so me as the outgoing director and Casey as the incoming director, we thought it made good sense for us to pop on together and let this be a little more conversational. But I think it's important, first of all, maybe Casey, you can give some of just the rundown that you usually give about some housekeeping stuff, and then we can contextualize a little bit what we're doing here today, and we can go from there.
Sounds good. So today is the kickoff of the second annual Meaningful Change series, which is super exciting that we are continuing this programming. And if you've been in Hopin before, you'll notice to the right is the chat box. So if you have any questions, concerns, or technical issues, you can chat in the chat box. So it can be there to ask us questions, to ask our guests questions, or if you're just needing help technologically, you can always hang out in the chat box. Trying to think of anything else. We have some people here from Praxis that are going to talk to us later or in a few minutes about their updates on Ciitizen. But I thought maybe, for the families that maybe haven't been here before, I'm kind of putting you on the spot here, Hillary, but, what were your thoughts or your goals with Meaningful Change at the beginning? And I can kind of talk a little bit about, how this year is going to kind of go in line with that.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think when we started Meaningful Change last year, it was after the success of our clinical trial readiness series, where we brought in sort of outsiders to talk to us about clinical trials and what they look like, how they work, and the things that we should know going into what's now our first clinical trial, SCNA specific clinical trial that's enrolling currently. But on the heels of that, I think we had a lot of discussions where we were saying, okay, so that's great to bring outside information in, but as a community, the SCNA community knows so much about itself. We have a parent who has navigated literally anything that we can possibly think of at this point. And so what we were really starting to explore with a Meaningful Change was how we can take the knowledge that's found within our community and leverage it to better support our children. And I think what's so important, and I will never stop banging this drum, is that the SCNA community is really unusual in the ways that it engages, right? Mm-hmm. There's all kinds of DEE and similar communities out there, and many of them are really good at engaging, but we're particularly good at it. We engage deeply, meaningfully, measurably amongst ourselves and with the medical research and drug development communities. And I think the whole idea here was just like, how do we dig into that more deeply? And how do we sort of think about standardizing that knowledge and bringing it more officially to our families? And I think kicking this off with Praxis is the perfect example because of the Ciitizen effort that was underway last year. And we knocked it out of the park, unlike any other community Ciitizen has ever seen. They're still talking about it. And, it's been a year, and it's about time for us to hear what came out of that. And so that's, part of, in a few minutes when we introduce our guests, what we'll be talking about. So that's kind of the overarching goal. And I know, Casey, you have designed a really exciting program this year. I can't take any credit for any of this. It's all Casey. So Casey, maybe you want to talk a little bit about what's coming up in the next sessions and how that all plays into the big picture.
Yeah. So my theme kind of thought process was looking forward. So looking at long-term planning, what are things that we can kind of take away from our day-to-day, but really implement it as we're looking forward to the future with our kids. And so today we're going to talk about Praxis. We're going to look at, some of that Ciitizen data, how we totally kicked butt a year ago and had so many people. The last thing I saw, now I could be wrong, was about 104 slots that I think that we filled in record timing. I mean, it was like a couple days, if that. So just fantastic. And then we're going to be looking forward in the weeks to come. We are going to have some guest lecturers. So we have actually our own Heather Crowley and then Mary Turner from Life Course coming. They're going to do some different tools. So next week's going to be really cool about a trajectory tool that we're going to actually present to our community. And we might actually hold more meetings if we like that, that can help us kind of look forward. We're also going to do some financial planning, have an expert come to talk to us about that. We're going to talk about vehicle and home mods. So lots of fun stuff to look forward to through the next couple weeks.
Absolutely. That sounds fantastic. And then also we'll have the last session I will be back on. So I'm not going to be on the next 3 sessions. Casey's going to take care of all of you. And then our final session, I will be back to co-host with Casey. And we have Neurocrin joining us to give us some updates on their end. So super exciting series of events. And as always, watch them live because it's so much fun and exciting to engage, but things will be available online after the fact as well.
Yep.
All right. So with that, do you think we should invite our guests on? What do you think?
Let's do it. Yeah.
Well, Christian and Kelly, I know you guys are here, so take your time. I know it's been a little while since Kelly's been on, but there is the share audio and video button up the top there. And sometimes it takes a few minutes to get clicked in. It took me a moment this afternoon, but oh, there we go. Hi, Kelly.
Hi, how are you?
Well, thanks. How are you?
I'm doing well, other than I was looking on when I need to how to share my screen and I can't figure that out.
Okay, well, we can talk you through that.
Okay.
You know how I feel about errors, right, Kelly? Live on if we figure stuff out together.
That you love errors, and it made me feel more comfortable because I'm bound to make one when I'm sharing my slide.
Yes. Yeah, I'm a big fan of errors. And I know we'll give Christian a minute, since he hasn't been on before, it might take him a second to pop on.
Yep.
But thank you for joining. And maybe while we're waiting for him to come on, Kelly, if you could, I know our families have met you before, but it would be great if you wanted to just give a little intro. And before you do, I think I just want to flag for everyone the exciting thing about Kelly, among many exciting things, is, of course, that she is an SCN2A mom and has found her way to working for quite some time at Praxis at this point, and bringing the parent view internally to a biotech, which is so important. And I think I just always want to be sure to flag that because it makes you extra special.
Thank you. Yeah, thanks, Hillary. Yes, I was a high school English teacher by training until I had my son Connor, who's now 12. When he was 5, he was diagnosed with an SCN2A mutation. And I, along with 2 other co-founders, started a biotech company to help discover treatments for SCN2A. And one of our programs was licensed by Praxis. I've been here for about 3 years now. I work in clinical operations, which is literally setting up and managing clinical trials. I work on the 2A program, and I also work on the SCN8A program. And incredibly excited to be here today and share the Ciitizen data. And when I was listening in on your introductions, yes, incredibly amazing work by this foundation where we opened a cohort of SCN2A patients and SCN8A patients, 50 spots. Within a day, the SCN8A cohort was completely filled and we had to open a second cohort. So that kind of engagement makes what we're trying to do at Praxis doable. So incredibly grateful to your community for the engagement with the Ciitizen, and can't wait to share some stats with you today.
Absolutely. And I think this is one of those things. And Kelly, I think it's hard in biotech, unless you're a parent in the rare disease world, to understand that the rare disease worlds are often really insular. And so they kind of only know what's happening, how they work, right? So like internally in SCN8A, you know how we do stuff. But if you're KIF1A or if you're FOXG1 or you're SCN2A, the dynamic is different. Mm-hmm. And so I always want to bang that drum with this community because I don't think they realize always how extraordinary they are, because it's just kind of how we roll as a community. And so it's really good to hear it over and over and over again.
Yeah, kudos to you, and keep it up, please. Right.
Yes. And I see Christian has popped on, but and I'm not sure. Christian, you're muted and we can't see you. So if you look at the bottom of your screen, I'm sure you can hear me. There's like a closed captioning thing, should have a line through it. And then there's a video camera that probably has a line through it. You want to click that to show your video. And then the next one over is the mic, and that probably has a line through it. You want to click that to show your, or to get your audio on. If it's still buggy, you can also pop off, refresh your page, and pop back in. And we can keep talking. Trust me. I think we have plenty to talk about. Yeah, okay. That's usually the refresh is usually the best trick.
He direct messaged me and said he was having a little bit of issues with the Microsoft browser. So I think we're going to get him up and running soon.
Yeah. Okay, cool. So Kelly, I know you have slides to show and stuff, but maybe do you want to just dive in a little bit big picture and talk about what we're going to talk about today with Christian? And
yes, sure. Christian's going to start by giving a bit of an overview on the drug program. I'm going to move into the Ciitizen data. I was going to give sort of a big picture overview so the community can see what's possible with this data. And then I was going to move into a patient journey, which it's my favorite thing about the Ciitizen data, because you can get so specific chronologically on every single patient. I've never been able to do this with any data set I've seen in any of the DEE spaces. And we have done this on every single SCN8A patient that is in this cohort. So it's my favorite thing. Talking about stats of, seizure frequency and comorbidities, right, is one thing. But then to chart a day in the life for a lifetime of an SCN8A patient, it's so eye-opening. We have every time we do a patient journey, our meetings, the people that work at Praxis are in tears because you can finally see what these patients and what these families go through on a daily basis.
Wow.
Absolutely. That's amazing. And I know I've been so excited to hear one of these patient journeys because I know there's been a lot of discussion in my meetings with Praxis about how exciting these are. And so it's really, really exciting to get to see one for our community.
Yeah, I agree. Yep.
And while we give Christian time to pop back in, do you think, we could skip ahead if it's okay with you?
We can flip the order. I can share my slides and I can start.
Okay, yeah. So you want to hit that computer screen looking thing.
I'm not seeing it.
Okay, so closed captioning, video camera, mic,
yes.
And hit the
okay.
window.
All right, let's try it. Okay. Okay.
Look at that.
Is it working? Okay. All right.
Okay. Yep.
Except now I can't see you. Hang on.
Okay. I think you shared your full screen. So
Okay.
if you can share just the window, it might let you see us at the same time.
All right, let me try that. Oh, okay. Yep. Is that better?
That's showing your browser window, but if
you can't see my slides,
no.
I'm pretty sure Deborah used to share the slides for me when I did this platform.
Yeah.
Okay, let me try one more time.
It's the same.
Is that better?
It's the same, but I think if you close your browser window and open your slides, you probably won't be able to see us, but we'll be able to see your slides.
Okay. Can you see this?
Yes, but it's not in presentation.
Okay. Oops. Oh man, I'm having problems.
That's all right.
You're totally fine.
No worries. Like I said, we can hang out all day. Casey and I rarely are lacking for conversation topics.
Yeah, exactly right. There we go.
Okay, can you see my slides now?
We sure
can see your slides, and it's in it's not in presentation mode. You can see them.
Sorry.
Okay.
if you want to, you could go, I think, up to that slideshow next to animations.
Or at the bottom there.
Yeah.
The fourth one over.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, it's so if you go at the bottom, there's like I move my cursor like you can see it. I'm sorry.
But I can't see you anymore. That's the problem.
Right. So at the very bottom of your slide deck, there's there's 4 icons kind of to the right-ish. And there's one that looks like a presenter. Yeah, those, yep. I think one more. Yeah, there you go. Perfect.
Yeah. And if you can't see us, that's okay, because we can.
I can't see you. So will you stop me if there's a question or a comment?
Oh, absolutely.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Okay. All right. So the 8A citizen data. Here we go. So what we're trying to achieve with the 8A citizen data is really how can we learn the most about the 8A patients and the 8A community to provide the best therapies possible. And one of the ways we're going to be using this data is to educate regulators in a pre-IND meeting when we go to file the IND. And so far, it's the most robust data set to date on 8A patients. And it really demonstrates the burden of disease. And then how is this data going to impact our CDP or clinical development plan? So we're getting clarity on the age of study participants. Many, as you'll see soon, many of these patients have very large numbers of seizures early in life. So it really strengthens the argument to include patients as young as possible in these trials. We have a lot more clarity on the exact medications these patients are taking. The 8A community as a whole is on a lot of different medications for seizures and then also for other comorbidities. And then seizures as the primary endpoint, but what else makes sense for an endpoint? Things like sleep, behavior, irritability, and then a lot of GI dysfunction in this group as well. So then let's look at the data for a minute. So we talked earlier about there were over 100 patients that enrolled in Ciitizen. There were 79 total patients that made it through the entire onboarding process. So the demographics, we have pretty equal numbers of male and female patients, 39 female patients, 40 male patients. And then this is their age in years at the time we received the data. And so our youngest patient is 1 year old and our oldest patient is 23. And then this is this 4 of the patients in this cohort did not ever have a seizure. They had autism and intellectual disability. So of the patients that had seizures, you can see, so these, every time the patient goes to the neurologist, there is an update in the medical records about the current seizure frequency. So all of these lines, all of these circles represent there is seizure activity happening when they were updating the neurologist. So all of the green circles is this patient had status, and then all of the lighter green circles is infantile spasms. So you can see there are patients that cluster with one of their first seizure types being infantile spasms. And the number of patients in 8A that has had status is obviously very substantial. I'll pause here for a minute and see if there's any questions.
So can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. So I just, I wanted to just pause for a second and say, so you said this is the most robust data set on SCN8A.
The Ciitizen data as a whole, yes.
As a whole, yeah. So I just want to pause there because not a lot of communities have this. And if this is representing, you know, the most robust data set, I just want to like ring that bell for a minute. It's really exciting for this community. And I am seeing there's one question coming in from Shelly. She asks if each of these lines represents one patient. So if on that sort of y-axis, each one of those is one patient.
Yeah, ignore this. This is how we code the unique ID to the patient. So yes, there are, ignore this please, but yes, there are 75 patients listed on here with their seizure counts. And one other thing I want to point out, this little black line right here, I believe you can see my cursor, is the end of records. And so if there are no circles on some patients, that means that they have current seizure control.
Okay. Okay. Oh, so on a patient like that line occurs early. So at 2 or 4, that means that they got seizure control at that point.
Correct. But as you can tell, right, there are periods of seizure control and then seizures come back.
Yep. Yes, that is familiar.
Okay. And then patients group by age at seizure onset and type. So in this cohort, we have 30 patients that had seizure onset prior to 3 months of life. And then the average, it was 12.6 days till onset of seizure. The patients that had onset with infantile spasms, there were 7 of those patients. And then 184 days on average to onset of seizures, which is about 6 months. So again, first onset was infantile spasms, a very distinct type of seizure. And then the patients that had onset after 3 months without infantile spasms, there were 38 of those patients. And then the average age at onset of seizures, 38.7 days, so a little over a year old. And then, as I mentioned earlier, there were 4 patients in this cohort, 3 that had autism, 1 that had a diagnosis of intellectual disability, but without seizures. But as you can tell on the previous slide, there are some patients that present later in life with epilepsy. And then this is the count of all medications per patient. So right here we have sodium channel anti-epileptic drugs. We have all other AEDs that are not in the sodium channel class. And then we have other medications that are non-AED. So things like GI, behavior, agitation, sleep. And then patients average being prescribed 18 total medications with a range of 3 is the minimum, and then 44 medications was the patient that had been prescribed the most.
Wow.
And then I'll drill down more into that. So these are the most commonly prescribed sodium channel blockers, and you can see the exact number of patients that are on these medications. These are the other most commonly reported AEDs, and then these are the medications typically not prescribed for epilepsy, things like GI, breathing issues.
And can I ask, these represent the meds that they have had throughout the course of their medical history, not necessarily current meds?
Completely correct.
Okay. Because I think it's interesting to see the levetiracetam so high, which makes sense, maybe not as a current med in many instances, but it's usually a go-to perhaps prior to diagnosis. And we do know that there are some cases where it works in this population.
Yep, exactly right. Yep. And then most common indications for that other category, I felt like it would provide insight if we name some of them. So GERD, incredibly common in this patient population, obviously the epilepsy, constipation, sleep, a massive problem, insomnia, vomiting, some of the highest ranking ones. I'll just leave this slide up for just a minute.
Wow. And Kelly, can you share these slides with us so we can put them up in the support group?
I don't think that's a problem. Sure.
Okay, thank you.
Because
I think it's always helpful, and obviously I know I'm preaching to the choir here, but to see your child in this kind of data, and I'm looking through and thinking about all the meds we've been through, and feels very familiar.
Yes, absolutely.
It's like going down the list. You're like, yep, that's my child.
Yes. Yeah. And then this slide is comorbidities present in 15 or more patients. So like we touched on the very first slide, are there any other comorbidities that warrant its own endpoint in this patient population? So you can see obviously epilepsy, developmental delay, and sleep issues being the 3 most common, and then followed by a lot of GI, feeding difficulty, and GERD.
Yeah.
And then this is
sorry, I just want to, if we can pause there for a second, I just want to contextualize this for families, because it might be something, that notion of endpoints is still a little, we've gone over it some, but I just want to be sure that the families have a second to understand, when you design a clinical trial, you get approval based on an endpoint, right? So although we know that disorders like SCN8A are not just seizures are one of the easier endpoints to go after for this kind of a medication. And it's also what you would expect to see movement on quickly for a medication that is like 562. But because we understand that drugs like 562 are more precise in the way that they work, we anticipate or hope that they would have an effect on some of these other domains. But they're trickier to isolate, they're trickier to measure, and they can be trickier to move over a time period. Like if you think about developmental delay, you might not see a change in that for 6 months or a year of treatment. And so what people like Kelly spend their time doing is trying to figure out where there is hope to create movement, measurable movement, so that she and her colleagues can then go and make an argument to regulatory bodies like FDA that not only does this help with seizures, but it helps with other things. And that's the hope that we will see come out on the other side of a clinical trial. But it's a really, really difficult endeavor. And this kind of information is really helpful clinically, but it's also really helpful for drug development from that perspective as well.
Thanks so much for providing that clarity, Hillary. Okay, so the time from seizure onset to genetic testing, this looks very similar to the 2A data also. It coincides with when SCN8A was added to the genetic epilepsy panel. So as we know, when a baby or a child presents with seizures, one of the first things they do is use a genetic epilepsy panel. And I think right now we're up to over 300 genes that are on that panel that are known to cause epilepsy, obviously SCN8A being one of those. So we're able to diagnose much quicker. And then this is the mean counts of medications, procedures, and hospitalization. So in this data set, when they say procedures, they're talking about diagnostic procedures and they're talking about therapeutic procedures. So diagnostic procedures could be something.
I lost Kelly. Did you lose Kelly?
I did.
Okay, I was just making sure it wasn't just me.
I shouldn't have said how much I like errors.
Yeah, right?
We're having a technology tough day, I guess.
Jinxed us.
I know. Sorry.
Kelly, if you can hear us, do you think maybe a refresh might help her?
Yeah, refresh is always helpful. Karen says that's unbelievable. I'm wondering, are you talking about the medication number, Karen?
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah, it is absolutely startling. One of the things I would love to see come out of that data with more specificity would be how many of them are maintained. Because that's one of the things that I always found. Oh, there she is. Hey, Kelly.
Hi, I was talking and then I didn't hear anything. And then I clicked back to this sharing and I saw my internet went out. Where did you lose me?
We lost you with the
hospitalization.
The hospitalizations, yeah.
Mm-hmm. All right, sorry. Did you see the genetic testing time to diagnosis? Yes. Okay. Mm-hmm. Okay. Yep. Should I pull that other slide back up or should I move on to the patient journey? All right.
We can, wherever you want to go is fine. We were just talking about the number of medications, Kelly, and one of the things I noted that I would love to see come out of this data would be a look at the medications started and stopped. Because mm-hmm. one of the things I know sort of anecdotally is once your kid gets on a medication, no one ever wants to take them off of it, even if you know that's not working.
Yep.
And so I really actively had to constantly reduce Esme's med list. We're still on 12, because why not? But it would be like 30.
To your point, that's why I love this data. It's basically like, give me your question and I'm going to give you an answer because it's all in this data set.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think that's a really, from a clinically meaningful perspective, I think it would be really interesting to see that how, and on a patient level, right? That's like, you start a GI med and it's not working. So you add another, so you add another, so you add another. And with AEDs, it tends to happen a little bit less because you don't want 5 AEDs on, although some of us have been there. Mm-hmm. But it would be really interesting to just look at the number of background meds at any given moment that a child is on.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And so I think, the next step is huddling up with your team and what other questions do we want to know the answers to? Yep.
Absolutely. And families, that's a call to action, right? Like, what do you want to know? Because you have access to your medical records, and that's wonderful. The foundation has access to everyone who approved our access to this data. Kelly has access to all of the data, of course, de-identified in all of those instances. But these are the questions. It's really up to you guys what you want to know and what you think is meaningful. And what you think is meaningful will also help Kelly and the team make arguments to regulatory bodies about why a certain endpoint, for instance, is important.
Yeah. And also what we're looking at right now, I don't have this data to show you today, but also patients, 8A patients on sodium channel blockers, do their seizure frequency increase or decrease to try and figure out patients that would be most responsive with 562 or other medications also. So it's really exciting.
So are you able to then track that backwards to a particular variant? So you could conceivably create a variant list that would be suggestive of responsivity to sodium channel blockers?
In theory, yes. So the recurrent variants, do they have the same response? Unsure at this minute, but we're looking into that right now.
Mm-hmm. Got it. Okay. Because presumably that would be suggestive of a functional.
Exactly. Yes. Right. Okay. Yep.
I see Christian is back on as well. I don't know, Christian, are you able to share your video yet?
I think I'm going to move in Hillary to the patient journey. Yep, let's wrap that up, and then we can move to Christian, if that's okay.
Perfect. I'm excited about this patient journey.
Me too.
Yeah.
Okay. Can you see my screen okay?
Mm-hmm. Yes, but again in the browser. There we go. Yeah.
Yes? Okay. All right. So this is what we can put together with this data where we're isolating just one patient. And I just want to go over these classifications. So when we get the raw Ciitizen data, again, they're going through medical records from birth till present day, and they're pulling out all the extracted data in categories. So anything that's red is a medication update. Anything that's orange is what Ciitizen calls a clinical diagnosis. So a doctor has diagnosed that patient with something clinically. Yellow is procedures, and we touched on that earlier. So any diagnostic procedure or therapeutic procedure. The green, the development. When the patient goes to the neurologist, oftentimes they'll run through a checklist. Can this patient, do they have head control? Can they sit unassisted? Can they stand? Can they walk? So we get updates throughout the medical records on developmental milestones achieved, not met, or lost. And then if they're regained again. The light blue is any hospitalization. The dark blue is the seizure count. So again, as most of us know, when we take our child to the neurologist, one of the first questions they ask is about current seizure frequency or seizure type. And then the purple is any adverse event to any medications tried. So I asked Hillary if I could have permission to share any of the patient journeys, and she sent me a few unique IDs. And the first.
Can you guys hear us?
Oh, we can hear you, Christian.
Okay.
Awesome.
I'll check back in once this part of the conversation is done. I know Kelly's trying to connect as well.
Okay.
Hillary, can you still hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay. All right. So Hillary sent me 5 different unique IDs that I had permission to share the patient journey. And the first one I opened, I just used because I felt like it was very representative of the data that we just went over. So I'm going to jump right into it. And again, this is chronological, the very first thing in the medical record. So you're really going on the journey with the patient. So we have the very first clinical diagnosis at birth, rapid breathing. And then the next entry, we have dependency on a feeding tube. And in this column right here is the patient's current age at the time of the event. This is the event start date. This is how long that clinical diagnosis lasted and the event length. So we have dependence on a feeding tube. And then we have diagnosed with GERD. And again, all at 1 month. Our first count of seizures, we're told this patient has 1 seizure per day at about 2 months old. They have a formal diagnosis, clinical diagnosis of epilepsy at 2 months old. Their first diagnostic procedure was an EEG that was normal. And in the medical records, the verbiage in the EEG report comes with the extracted data. So we know if it's normal or if it was abnormal, as you'll see later on, we're told why. And then the raw EEG tracings are also being analyzed as well. And then we have seizure history, prolonged seizure over 5 minutes, and then the patient was hospitalized. Right here, we can tell it was for 4 days at 2 months old. The next medication prescribed was for GERD. Again, it was ranitidine, and again at 2 months old. And then another EEG, a video EEG, 2 months old. And then we have another seizure count, about 1 seizure per day. The next clinical diagnosis, hypotonia or floppier muscles. Again, we're still at 2 months old. We have a next diagnostic procedure, an MRI of the brain. It was normal. And then 2 different medications, one for GERD and then Keppra for epilepsy. And then almost immediately after, prolonged seizure over 5 minutes, seizure count about 2 per day, and another prolonged seizure over 5 minutes. And then as you can tell, if a medication comes again, we know the milligram. So the Keppra was raised, the dose was raised. And then 2 more seizure counts in these medical records, 2 tonic-clonic seizures per day, and then another prolonged seizure of over 5 minutes. It's happening about twice per day. Another clinical diagnosis, poor visual tracking. And then we have our first developmental update. This patient has the ability to roll front to back, they're able, and it's at 3 months old. We have 2 hospitalizations back to back for increased seizure frequency. The first one was a day. The second one was hospitalized for 6 days. And then moving on to medication, put on topramate, and then the Keppra was raised again. Seizure history, more updates from neurology visits, 1 per day, and then more prolonged seizures over 5 minutes, getting another EEG that came back normal. We're at 3 months old. Development, this patient has the ability to produce voice, And then diagnostic procedure next, it was a normal result, MRI. And then we have a diagnosis of 8A at 3 months old. And then 3 more medications. So titrating the dose of the topamate. B6 was tried, and then Keppra being raised again. Another update on development. This patient at this time, 4 months old, is unable to control their head posture. And then sometimes in clinical diagnosis section, we'll get an update on if a specific symptom is improving or worsening. And so the hypotonia is now worsening. And then diagnostic procedure, another EEG that was normal at 4 months old. The patient was then put on phenobarbital, and then the topamate was increased. And then seizure update, 1 per day. And then diagnostic procedures, both normal, scan of the kidneys and ECG, and then another clinical diagnosis. This means you can hear high-pitched noises while this patient is taking a breath. And then right under that, at 4 months old, they're put on another medication, clonazepam for epilepsy, and then several different diagnostic procedures. So a barium swallow test, a normal result. The hypotonia is worsening, and another EEG at 5 months old, which was normal. The phenobarbital is raised. The patient's put on oxycarbazepine, and then we have more seizure counts. 1 per week, 0 per week, up to 1 per day, and then 2 per day, you can tell in a very short time, all at 5 months old and then 6 months old. And then development, this patient is able to use their hands, and then they're able to reach. Diagnostic procedures, another video EEG. This one is not normal. So there's excess slowing. They're having seizures on the EEG and sharp waves. And then this patient is, again, the dose is adjusted on phenobarbital. B6 is tried again. The dose is adjusted on the GERD medication. And then the oxycarbazepine is raised. And then seizure history update, about 1 clinical subclinical seizure per day. And then another clinical diagnosis of blurry vision, CVI. And then this patient at 7 months old is able to roll. And then 2 more normal diagnostic tests, and then moving on to being prescribed or increasing the dose of AEDs. And then our update, this patient's now having clonic seizures at 7 months old. And then another update about 0 per week. And then difficulty swallowing, another clinical diagnosis, and then a swallow study that came back normal, another video EEG, some abnormalities on the EEG. And then this patient is hospitalized in the epilepsy monitoring unit for a day. And then we're prescribed, there's changes in the phenobarbital, the oxycarbazepine, and then added an allergy medication, and then a new medication for GERD, and also a medication for bones, osteopenia. And then we have another update on 0 tonic-clonic seizures per week. 2 more clinical diagnoses. We're at 8 months old, disturbance in sleep, and then recurring ear infections. Another medication update. Whenever the patient is on a medication, you see that medication again, then you know the dose is being changed. Our seizure update, we're at 0 a week at 8 months old. And then clinical diagnosis of allergies and official diagnosis of global developmental delay. And then at 10 months old, this patient is unable to grip. They're admitted one more time to the epilepsy monitoring unit, this time for 2 days. They're 10 months old, and then they adjusted their oxycarbazepine. At this time, they're having 0 seizures per month at this update at the neurologist. Abnormal EEG, a lot of different spikes, and then clinical diagnosis, we have breathing issues, so respiratory distress, rapid breathing, another EEG at 10 months old, again, abnormalities, and then this patient goes into status. They're hospitalized for 6 days, this time for status, and some new medications are tried. Lorazepam for epilepsy, midazolam and rescue. They're put on fentanyl, and their oxycarbazepine is adjusted. And then very clinical diagnosis of bowel obstruction, and then the patient is put on a new medication for GERD, and then some of the epilepsy medications, again, are adjusted. Another epilepsy monitoring unit hospitalization for 2 days. And then another clinical diagnosis, hypotension. And then we have an update on development. At 11 months old, the patient is unable to crawl and they're unable to sit unassisted. And then another update on seizures. So prolonged seizure over 5 minutes, focal seizures, less than 1 a month, and tonic-clonic seizures, same. Development, this patient able to roll from front to back. And then another diagnostic procedure trying to figure out what's happening in this child's sleep. Another bout of status. And again, we're 1 year old here. And then we have medications, either increases or decreases, and then put on melatonin to help with sleep. Another seizure update, focal seizure 1 a week, and then diagnosed with sleep apnea.
Kelly, I was going to jump in really quick. This is just phenomenal that you guys have been able to get all this data. And I can tell you that it's 100% true because I'll share this is my daughter. This is Stella.
Okay.
And I'm going through this going, holy cow. Like, of course, I've remembered most of this. You know, some of it is a complete blur as I'm going through this. And if you see me teary-eyed, it's just like, holy cow, reliving, you know, all of this. But this is crazy. You've gotten all of this data from me just signing up for the Ciitizen natural history data. I've not done anything. Like, I did not make this chart. I did not have to provide, you know, any of this. You guys have gotten all of this from her medical history, and that's just phenomenal.
And you make a really good point, and that was my experience. So when we were vetting Ciitizen, we were really excited. We had seen their presentations, but I wanted to sign my son up and then have them present the data to Praxis to see, like, is the information we need really in the medical records? And I had your same experience where Ciitizen was presenting to our company all about my son, and I was just in awe that they had nailed it so well.
Yeah, like, yeah, goosebumps.
Right.
Just, this is her. This is, and we could probably talk about 2016 for the next 30 minutes, honestly.
I don't need to go through all this. As you can see, we're just at 1 year old. But if we keep scrolling down, right, there's so much more. And I haven't seen any data set, like I said, where we can really go on the journey with this patient and see every single thing they experienced. And then at the very bottom, I summarized it for you. So this specific patient trialed 32 different medications. They were given 38 different clinical diagnoses. They went through 39 different procedures. And just at 5 years old, at the end of the records, the patient was able to roll and then unable to sit, unassisted, crawl, stand, walk, or grasp. However, I did want to point out that we got an update that this specific patient can use a communication device. This patient had 20 different hospitalizations, and their seizure onset was less than 2 months. At their highest, they were having 40 per day. And the last update we got currently at the end of records, about 1 per month.
Crazy.
That is astounding. And
Right.
Kelly, did you say, so you have one of these on every single patient that enrolls?
Every single patient.
And do you make them or does Ciitizen make them?
No, so we use the raw data to then just sort it chronologically. So all of these sections, so for example, hospitalizations, it's its own tab, all of the data, or diagnostic procedures or seizures. So what we did is we combined everything together and just labeled it chronologically so you could see every single symptom, every seizure count.
That is incredibly powerful.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I think, this is, again, I think Kelly and I both of us having a foot in drug development and a foot in parenting, can understand how hard it is to translate the realities of day-to-day life, right? Like it's,
yes.
you talked about it. You're like,
yes.
And I think part of it is, frankly, and this is not a criticism of us as parents at all, but it becomes so normalized that we're like, yeah, they had a seizure, or I'm leaving Ez at home to travel. She has a respiratory illness. Yes, she's still having trouble. Her SATs are low. But for me, it's like, this is normal. And so I talk about it the same way you might talk about leaving your typically developing child home with a little sniffle, but it's not the same. And so, and you also when you just get a piece of it here and there versus we're a month into this child's life and they've already had more procedures than most people have in their entire existence.
Mm-hmm. Yes. And in drug development at Praxis, there's so much talk about genetic epilepsies and seizures, but I've struggled for a couple years on how to convey the severity of these two diseases, 8A and 2A, and this data set finally does it.
Yeah. And I know, Kelly, you said in our meeting in September, and this really stuck with me, was that Ciitizen had told you that the data sets that they had gathered for 2A and 8A stood apart from the other DEEs that they were collecting data on, just in sheer bulk of medical records.
Yes.
Which tells us.
Yeah, I can forward you. I was going to include it in today's presentation at the last minute. I didn't, but I have the stats on that from Ciitizen. So of all their genetic epilepsy cohorts that they have, how is 8A and 2A different? It's the number of medical records. It's the number of hospitalizations. It's the number of medications cycled through. So they listed out for me, and I'll forward this to you, all of the different genetic epilepsy cohorts they have on Ciitizen and the stats of 8A and 2A compared to the rest in severity.
Right. And again, I think this is one of those things that if you're in a world, right, where everyone is 8A and that's what you know. But again, people like Kelly and myself are having to sort of like look outside of these entity, these groups and see how they fit into a larger picture. And it has always been my impression that 8A, and I couldn't speak to 2A because I'm not part of it, but that 8A was significantly more severe than many of the DEEs that I was interacting with as far as seizure frequency, hospitalizations, etc. And it's nice to, it's not nice, but it's nice to have the proof of that. And it helps make the argument for why we need to do what we're doing.
Yes.
Just that validation.
Yeah.
It also validates how many gray hairs I have.
This is what we've gone through with our children. I mean, like Hillary has shared, I live this day in and day out, and every time I create a patient journey, it affects me emotionally.
Yes. And I think that's again, that's the power that we bring to this space, right? Is that it's an emotional thing. It's a passion that comes out of love and understanding of reality. And that's something that you don't find every day, because so I again want to acknowledge my appreciation of what you bring to this space. And I know, I'm guessing, and I'm on full screen, so I can't see if we're getting questions, but we got questions. So looks like we've got one question saying, we've been on the same 3 medications for 7 years. Stomach shuts down. I question if sodium channel blockers are causing this.
So that's that question, right? It's what is a symptom of the disease and what is a symptom of the medications? And so we have that question too for quite a bit of this data, and just to go through it in a deeper way. And sometimes we might not know the answer to that because these patients are on so many medications overall. Right.
And the question sort of hints at or motions toward why more precise, more potent medications are so necessary. Because I remember someone who actually, the community all knows, I think it was JP from Xenon, describing sodium channel blockers like a sledgehammer just coming through and knocking everything down, when really all we need to do is hit one channel, or hit a channel in a particular way, which those of you who followed the 2 medications in this world of SCN8A know I'm describing 2 approaches, mechanistic approaches, right? Either hitting NaV 1.6 exclusively or hitting just the persistent current across the sodium channel, so that you're not, again, just swinging that sledgehammer through and hoping to stop seizures and also causing all sorts of other havoc. Karen asked the question that I figured someone would ask: will we have access to patient journeys for our own children?
We haven't been asked that question, Hillary. I'm sure you and I, or Casey, Hillary, and I can talk and work something out.
I knew it was coming. Everyone's going to want this. Okay, fantastic. And Shelley asked the other question I was going to ask as well, in the patient journey. Does it say when the medications are stopped? Because I was super curious. I'm sure she's thinking about the levetiracetam, and we saw it increase. We saw that seizure rate increase. Does it show the stoppage?
So I will say this, and I'll tell a little story that my answer is part of it. So when I take my son to the neurologist, for whatever reason, they still have the same 4 old medications that they go through, right? And say, your son's still on this, correct? And I scream and say, no, he hasn't been on that for many years, remove it completely from his records. And then the next visit, for whatever reason, it's back up again. Stopping the medications in this data set is the place where it's difficult to tell if a medication has 100% been stopped or not.
Okay. That's really interesting. And I think we all have had that, right? That medications, the changes. The one for me that makes me nuts is all the medications being written by mouth. And every time I change it, I'm I cross it out and I say, by G2, this is important. She's NPO. But that's so. Tyler asks, how does the system deal with contradictory information in records or inaccurate entries?
So at Ciitizen, there are 2 genetic counselors that are working there on the Praxis projects. So in addition to the machine learning, we have 2 genetic counselors going through everything. If there is any contradictory information, they first go back to the institution. Potentially it's that we're missing earlier records. We've had that happen before, and then they're able to get those records, and then the data set makes sense and is complete. Okay. That's the only example that I can think of that relates to this question, where it just wasn't a complete set.
Okay. Fantastic. Now, I know we're at time, and I think Christian is still having trouble with audio and video.
I took the whole time anyway. I didn't mean to. I never know what kind of questions we'll get or how fast we'll get through.
If you can hear me now.
We hear you, Christian.
We hear you.
Great. Thank you. Thank you so much, everybody. Thank you, Kelly, for presenting, especially for being able to do it alone because I was so locked down here. And I just wanted to offer a couple of next steps as we go ahead and just share kind of where we are with the overall work with Praxis 562 and the growth of our commitment. Really, I think we're hitting a next phase of work here where publicly we've announced our refocusing of our rare disease R&D team to specifically be epilepsies and genetic epilepsies, recommitting our resources in a more focused way to move with more urgency, data kind of be really fueling that fire, and your commitment as a community helping fuel that fire to make movement faster. So we will be, as a team, announcing more next phase work on our Epilepsy Day on April 27th. So I'll make sure we send a date out from patient advocacy to Hillary and Casey and the SCN8A community about that. And we're in the grind right now. We're looking at the current data and assessing the formulation grind of bioavailability, of really making sure dosages are consistent across, moving from tablet to gel form, based on the insights you've helped share. And we will be looking forward to reporting next steps on moving towards an investigational trial as well. So stay tuned for now, but we do feel we're on track to stick to that mid-year next phase of work with the community.
Okay. Okay. So we're getting a question. Can you give us an idea of when the trial will start? Is it 2022?
We are targeting mid-year 2022 for phase 2 work. So I know we had originally said sometime like first half of in December. In refocusing the team, this was one of the reasons, was to make sure we held to our commitments and push more of the team into one direction in our progress here. So we are absolutely committed to that.
Okay. That sounds great. Exciting to hear. And we'll look forward to more announcements from you guys on April 27th.
Yep.
All right. That sounds great. And then Hillary and Casey.
And thank you, by the way. I just wanted to reiterate the enormous praise for this community, for the group of parents who've been so incredibly dedicated to keep contributing to this study, to keep working so hard to end up where we are, as being able to validate a lot of the things that you've been saying and arguing for. It's a real testament that this is how industry moves with you too, is through this commitment and the urgency to make a better day for each and every kid going forward. So thank you to every single parent, thank you to every family, and thank you, Casey and Hillary, for your support and continued collaboration.
Of course. And as Christian, we didn't really get to introduce you.
Yeah.
I should just say for the community, Christian is the new VP of Patient Advocacy at Praxis. He comes from a background at Global Genes, and he's relatively new in his role, but Casey and I are working with him closely as well and connecting with him. And Christian is fully aware, as is Kelly, that this community has been interacting with this company since it was literally 4 people, and been telling our stories and as you say, Christian, advocating for certain approaches. And it's fantastic to see those needs being highlighted in the data that we've all collected together. Certainly very proud of that work. And I hope to, whatever you guys can send over that we can share. Kelly, the slides would be great. Answers on whether we can do patient journeys for multiple children, and if we can share those, if we're getting them, if we can share them. And with that, we should probably wrap up today. We always run a little over because it's so much fun to have these conversations. And this is particularly exciting. A particularly exciting one. And I know I had said at the beginning, I won't be on next week. You'll be in the capable hands of Casey and covering more ground for next week's session. And we want to be sure also, before we close, to thank Praxis Precision Medicines, as well as Neurosciences, for their sponsorship of this event. Again, it's our second year doing it. I think it was a hit last year, and I think it will be even better this year with Casey at the helm. So with that, Casey, do you have any other closing remarks?
Yeah, no, I think that's it. Make sure that you pencil us into your calendar for next week, as we will be at the same day and time of the week as we come back together with Heather Crowley and Mary Turner as we look at a trajectory tool that we can use to kind of look forward into our kids' future and how that looks like and our goals for those. So it'll be an exciting time.
I'm excited. And Christian and Kelly, thank you again for joining us. And sure we'll be in touch soon.
Sounds good. Thanks so much.
Thank you for having us. We're really glad to support the series.
Thanks. Have a good one. Bye.
Yeah.